This is Dead Serious, a show about short horror stories worthy of discussion. I'm Dead Palette, and I'm reading some creepypasta. Injectors. Today, at this moment and non-time, we're going to be taking a look at The Hateful Flesh. Here on the Creepypasta Wikia. That is a very enticing title, so let's get right into it. Arnold wept as he ran. He wept from the near transcendental agony that coursed through his innards like tidal waves of needles and broken glass. From the very beginning, we have a third-person narrative, and we have very romantic style language, very poetic language, not very attuned to what creepypasta typically is, or what ashcan horror is. So we're going to judge the story based on those merits, because that's what it's setting us up for. He wept when his tongue, already stretched beyond its natural limits, rubbed against his splintered teeth to taste the grisled chunks of his infant daughter, whose soft flesh he had been forced to consume an hour ago. Holy shit, that's pretty fucking metal. I wonder why he was forced to do that, and I hope that we are given adequate justification for how metal this is. He wept as his knuckles shifted of their own accord to grasp at the matted clumps of blood-soaked hair that once belonged to his wife. He wept and ran, feeling his rebelling muscles contracting and swelling under his battered skin with each painful movement. He wanted to stop. He needed to stop. But he was no longer in control. He was a prisoner, trapped and suffering within his own skin. Nothing wrong with his writing. It's very vivid, very visual, very easy to digest. The question I have is, where is this narrative going, and is it going to justify what we're having right now? I think a lot of the times when stories get right into the very metal imagery, the very gruesome right off the bat, usually it's because they don't want to do the setup of making you care about the wife, making you care about the baby. And I'm wondering, are we going to care? Are we going to care that Arnold has gone through this by the end of this story? I'm just not sure. So let's press on. His legs took him over a fence and carried him onto a weed-choked lawn. Arnold felt the impact send tremors through his twisted bones. His head tilted downward, allowing him a view of the twin horrors of raw flesh and jutting bone that his legs had become. And is he already running on these, or did this just happen? Arnold screamed in his mind and fought against the invisible shackles that bound him, but he couldn't free himself, and he knew, despite the anguish that the knowledge brought, that he was not going to wrest control of his faculties from whatever held the reins now. This confirms what I had suspected, that he is not in control of his body, and that is a very supernatural thing. So let's see what explanation they have that is supernatural. That's all his body was now, hopped another fence and bolted past the grimy mirror that sat alone in a backyard much like the previous one, his head twisted towards it as it looked for a new meal. Arnold floated in his own mind like a rotting piece of trash in a dark pond, deaf and mute, but not numb or blind. He could see the vulgar mockery that had been made of his own face. So he's running through people's backyards and he is seeing mirrors? Like all of these backyards have mirrors in them for some reason? But with the way that we are describing this, it's sounding like he is a werewolf, just not in control of his own body. Well, okay. The eyes, formerly green, and now full of human emotion, now swollen with red blood and rolling madly. The lips which had kissed his wife are now strips of pink meat, dangling before a dribbling maw of full teeth like wood splinters set in gum, slathered in enamel, and the blood of his own family. Okay, so he's definitely a werewolf. That answers that question. He couldn't close his eyes, and the moment in which he saw that obscene thing which seemed to stretch on into infinity, then the moment finally ended, and Arnold floated down into the depths of his own memories. He first remembered all of the happy moments that he had shared with his wife and daughter, even if the former moments had been longer than the latter. Linda's eyes beaming, Linda's beaming smile as he proposed to her, their first love-making session, and the feel of her warm skin under his hands, plural, the delightful tears that welled up in her bright blue eyes as she told him they were going to be parents. Arnold's body had made its way into the woods. The change in terrain from soft grass to flat concrete to hidden branches and sharp stones, redefining pain. Linda's bright blue eyes, the scent of her hair, the way she giggled when he prodded her toes. So now the story is trying to make us care about Linda, and that's good and all, but I don't know. I question putting this part of the story here. I think that maybe it would be beneficial to put the caring about Linda and describing Linda and why we care about Linda stuff before her death, because now it's kind of like the psychological thing where we know now not to get invested. The mutilated body raced across the ground on all fours. Even as his knees inverted themselves with a tearing of sinew, Arnold felt his spine press through the skin of his back, splitting it as cleanly as if the wound had always been there. Meredith's birth, the pain in Linda's face, the tears, then her screams being joined by the harsh wailing of the baby. Ellipses. I appreciate the quality of going back and forth between beautiful memories that are very intimate and now to the very violent, disintegration of his body. The jumping back and forth, I think, works as a filmmaking technique or an art technique, visual art, but here it's not doing quite as much for me, I don't think, because even though I'm getting a decent picture in my head, it is inherently less visual. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. The body leaped forward, higher than humanly possible, and landed in a thicket, the small thorns of broken bone that jutted out from its raw fingertips, reaching out, grabbing at a faint, furry form that huddled in the undergrowth. The long hours spent tending to the body, her tiny lungs producing shrieks that seemed to belong to a far larger person than she, the look of annoyance that he and Linda shared, looks that would be forgotten when Meredith smiled benevolently up at them from her crib. Ellipses. The small creature, a rabbit, judging by its long ears and hind legs, squealing as it raised its tiny body to its maw. Then came the crush of tiny bones and the gush of hot blood. This is working for me not as horror or as realism, but as a poem. Its poetic qualities are very beautiful, and I think that a lot of people only have so much tolerance for poetry. At least I do. But as poetry, I think that this is functioning extremely well. It feels like something that should be put into a book of poems rather than something to be put into a collection of short stories, horror or otherwise. And again, I cannot help but feel that there will be no overall arching twist or story outside of he runs away, and I just don't know what happens next. I can't conceive of a satisfying ending for the story at this point, but perhaps that is just me. Linda calling to him as he went off to work, feeling in equal parts guilty for leaving her with the baby and envious of the time that she would get to spend with her. Then the dull grind of the office, in which a subtle pain began to prick at his stomach. The last of the rabbit slithered down the monstrous body's gullet to join Meredith and what little of Linda he had been able to stomach. The pain in his innards grew steadily, growing. First a rapid fire of tiny jabs, then a lingering ache, then a burning pain, and he, in all of his foolishness, had ignored it, had kept it away with painkillers until it blossomed into a type of agony that he had never felt before. So I think maybe we're actually doing an itchy tasty here. I think we might actually be doing The Keeper's Diary from Resident Evil 1. And if that is the case and it keeps up this pace, I would probably feel pretty favorably about this story. Arnold's body, now flayed by and impaled on thistles and splattered with even more blood, scuttled deeper into the woods, treading shards of broken bottles and old shell casings. Arnold briefly caught a glimpse of a dented truck with muddy wheels. So there might be hunters after him. I am really starting to turn back around on this story. It's starting to work for me. The silent trip to the hospital after he had pissed red, the fearful looks shared by husband and wife, and the deep nausea rolling in his gut, copulating with the pain, then the arrival, the stink of antiseptic, the long wait, and then the doctor's words. Arnold watched from inside the tomb that his body had become as its fingers wrapped around the throat of the hunter, pressing the tiny spears of bone into the meat of his neck and pulling the flesh apart with savage slowness. This is beginning to sound a lot like Bloodborne, and I am okay with that. And now I am picturing nothing but Bloodborne in my head. The only thing that insinuates that this isn't Bloodborne is the fact that he goes to an office, and motherfucker, there were offices around in Victorian England. For all I know, this is Bloodborne. Those words, spoken by the man who had said the same words 1,000 times. I'm sorry, but we discovered several tumors in your stomach and kidneys, and we believe them to be malignant. The hunter tried to struggle, tried to fire his gun at Arnold, and Arnold silently prayed that he would be able to pull the trigger to end the nightmare. The hunter's nightmare? The nightmare that was his existence. I gotta be real, this really had a slow start, and I'm really getting infatuated with it, because they're trying to explore as many different aspects of this as possible, and I just didn't see that happening at the beginning, and I wonder if I discovered this in the wilds, if I would have continued to keep reading this. It's not that the writing was particularly bad at the beginning, but there was nothing really that eye-catching about it outside of the title itself. The opening line really wasn't that eye-catching to me about Arnold crying and running, but, this is all, really starting to flesh itself out. Him wanting to die is pretty horrific, as he's unable to die. So yeah. But his body proved stronger, and it pulled the poor man's throat open, tearing apart carotid and jugular, and laying the spine bare. Arnold screamed within the blackness of his mind and wished for it all to end. Linda's hand had gone to his when the news was broke, but either her skin was hot or his was cold. It felt like a buzzing in his ear, and his eyes grew watery as the realization washed over him. It's kind of weird that this is a short story, but it has this weird subplot going on of him being diagnosed with multiple tumors. But guys, man, the bigotry of low expectations here. I was not expecting this to, I wouldn't say that this is a emotional roller coaster or anything. I mean, it's just a short story, and so there's not as much time to get invested in these characters. But on a conceptual level, the going back and forth is like a risky technique that is really paying off for the story. The next year had been spent searching and begging and wasting time and money on a cure that they both knew did not exist. He found himself, more often than not, in Meredith's room, trying desperately to staunch the flow of tears at the sight of her incomprehending, bright-eyed gaze. The body finished its grisly meal, allowing the man within to feel its stomach burst under the sheer quantity of meat. His hopes that its hunger would be sated were snuffed out when the body turned and spotted the hunter's partner standing a few feet away with a look of primal horror written on his paling features. So we're going to be killing another hunter, and I wonder, or maybe the hunter kills us. I guess not us. I guess Arnold. We aren't the narrator of the story, are we? What I'm wondering is if the tumors are going to be linked to turning into a werewolf. And if it is the case that tumors turn you into a werewolf, we need to take a lot of silver bullets to the cancer wards, people. I mean, let's do this. Do you want werewolves to take over our country? Because that's how werewolves take over our country. It already happened in London. It could happen here, which is why we need silver bullets in every household, people. As the days passed, the pain grew worse. The tumors had become like a boogeyman to Arnold, haunting his dreams and waking him up in the dead of the night with their painful sting. Soon the trips to the nursery lessened as trips to the hospital grew more prevalent. I think a lot of people, even if, you haven't experienced something like cancer, and thank God I haven't, being in some sort of pain and trying to sleep gives you nightmares when you normally don't. Like, I never have nightmares. I very scarcely even have dreams. But if I'm feeling sick, then a lot of the times I'll end up just having like these waking dreams of pain. It's awful, and this is very evocative of that. Linda began to stay up with her husband, comforting him through the pain as best she could. But what little of their hope they had left was shrinking with each night spent in agony. And then, as if to rekindle their hope, Linda received news of a new medicine, a concoction of exotic and untested chemicals that went under the working title of tritohypnol, and the manufacturers needed test subjects to turn into motherfucking werewolves of London. Silver bullets, people, we need them. Googling tritohypnol, nothing comes up. Hypnol, nothing comes up. And looking into just Trito, I can't find anything either. So if you in the comments can decipher if that means anything more than just a random drug name, or a drug-sounding, something that a pharmaceutical company would come up with, then please let me know in the comments below. I would appreciate it. This would be my flaw as a writer, because if I was writing this story and I got to make up a drug name, it would be like lycanthropenol. This totally won't turn you into a goddamn werewolf. The second hunter was faster to react than his partner had been. He had raised the gun and fired before the beast fully closed the distance between them. Arnold felt the buckshot tear into his body, but the force that controlled it refused to buckle. The office that they met Dr. Morgan in was neat and pristine as any other doctor's office that they had been in, and they had seen many. Dr. Morgan was a short, robust man with smooth skin and eyes that seemed endlessly compassionate. He asked them a few questions, took his blood pressure, and then escorted him into a bland, white room where a single table and cots sat with their metal parts gleaming like diamonds in the harsh, fluorescent light. Cute little technique that you can use here. The office that they met Dr. Morgan in was as neat and pristine as any other doctor's office that they had seen, and they had seen many. That right there is implying that this thing is normal, therefore it is not normal. If you're telling them, it was just like any other thing, then that means on the surface level it is like that. Things seem that way, but there is something shady going on. So that's a thing to pay attention to and possibly utilize, because it's working to great effect here. The hunter screamed as the same talons which had killed his friend aimed for him. The tridohypnol was a clear liquid, like water, and it burned when it entered his bloodstream. It was only after the burning spread to every limb, every digit, and increased until it felt like he was sweating hot oil that he realized that he had made a very serious mistake. It had taken a few hours to become truly painful, but the two had returned home in that time. Looking back on it, Arnold wondered if things had been different, if it had been somewhere else, anywhere else. The fingers plunged into the second hunter's stomach and began to pull outward, and the barbs and the full weight of the body making sure that escape was impossible. Everything there is functioning as it should be. The tridohypnol started to twist his body a few minutes after the pain had become almost unbearable. His muscles tore, his skin ruptured, his teeth ground together until they cracked. His ligaments stretched in the throes of his spasms, and his mind grew hazy with hunger. The body limped away from its latest kill, gazing out into the world with Arnold's eyes, looking for new meat. Arnold felt the body's hunger roll through his imprisoned mind like thunder, but he didn't care. He found an exit, a way to block out the horror of what had happened to him. He turned his attention away from the present and plunged headfirst into the sea of the past, knowing that he had a lifetime of memories to return to, and if they ended before the body gave out, he would just start all over again. That is a satisfying ending. I'm very happy with that. Hopefully you are as well. Please, give constructive feedback and the criticism for what you think of The Hateful Flesh. It appears to be written by a person by the name of Hopefully Good Grammar with one M, and their icon is Nemesis from Resident Evil 3. Seems like a cool person. This story is above board. Really enjoyed it. Really surprised, quite honestly, that I enjoyed it as much as I did. Now, if you enjoyed that, consider helping out the community and supporting my channel. You can support the community by conversing in the comments below, going to toospooky.com, that's TOOspooky.com for more original horror stories, and trying your hand at writing short horror yourself. You can support me by liking this video, following me on Twitter, Tumblr, links down in the description, and checking out my art page as well. Thank you so much for your time, and now on to our sponsor at this non-moment in time. Seaweed. Seaweed. No, Siri, I said seaweed. No, Siri, don't search seaweed.